Okay, so welcome, and welcome to Salesforce. So, as we're hearing every day in the news, data is exploding everywhere. And about 90%, I don't know if you guys knew this, but about 90% of the data that exists today in the world was created in the last 2 years. And that growth is increasing exponentially. By some estimates, that amount today is roughly between 10 to 20 zettabytes. So that's 10 to the power 21. So it's sort of hard to understand. So if you take this Mac Mini, I don't know if any of you guys have this, you can buy them today with 1 terabyte hard drive. So that's 10 to the power 12 bytes. So how big is a zettabyte? So you're right at the top, and then you can see sort of the scales, and then essentially 1 zettabyte is that big block, which is like a building block. Sorry, not a building block, a building, a medium-story building, and that represents 1 zettabyte. So today in the world, we have about 10 to 20 zettabytes of data. And this explosion is happening partly through the growing availability of sensors embedded in all types of devices, which are increasingly mobile and remote. And this includes things like cameras, but also RFID, location, and also environmental sensors and software logs and app logs. And there's a lot of different devices and sensors. And Gartner predicts that by the end of this year, there's going to be about 6.5 billion connected devices, each of these with dozens of sensors. And that's actually grown over the last year by about 30%, and it's expected to triple, more than triple, to 20 billion by 2020. So if we consider statistics like these, we start to realize that we're really being swept away in this data deluge, which is only getting bigger. But as business people, we're also asking ourselves, what does this mean to us and to society? And specifically, what type of value can be unlocked by all of this data? So with that, let me welcome you formally tonight to our first Tech Leader Talk. And this is on the topic, how we're generating value through big data analysis. So tonight we have 3 speakers sitting in front of you who are each going to share their experiences and their insights of how their organizations are mining this big data and extracting actionable insights to create value for their organizations, for their clients, and for other stakeholders. And to learn more, we'll follow this up with a panel discussion with our 3 speakers, led by a leading researcher and professor and the director of the Schulich Business Analytics Program. So, without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker for tonight. So, Connie Bonello, who's right here to my right.
Hi, folks.
She's an associate partner at IBM, and she provides analytic solutions and services to enable innovation, business insight, and financial performance to financial service organizations. She's provided consulting services to such organizations across Europe, the Americas, and in Asia, including companies like TD and BMO locally, but also companies like the Bank of China and the Yin Group. And prior to consulting, she worked at companies like the American Express Bank in Athens, Westpac in Sydney, as well as other companies such as the Ministry of, organizations like the Ministry of Treasury and Economics and the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan Board. Today, she's also chairman of the Bonham Center Advisory Board for Sexual Diversity Studies at U of T. She's a member of the Finance and Property Committee at Trent, and a board member as well at the Inside Out Film Festival, which is pretty cool. So, Connie earned her honors BA in economics and her MBA in class of '98 from Schulich as well.
Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, so with that.
Thank you. Yes, Juan Carlos talked a lot about big data and how it's exploding, but it's also very diverse, the data that we're looking at today. It's no longer just numbers and transactional programs. Now we're looking at voice and text and so forth. So that's really adding to the complexity around big data. And my topic today is talking about the cognitive bank. How many people here know what cognitive computing is or have heard of cognitive computing? There's a few folks. How many people have heard of the Watson technology from IBM? Okay, more people have heard about Watson than cognitive. So they're kind of the same, but so what cognitive is all about? It's all about having a program that's based on natural language. How many people here know what natural language is? Okay, so we have a few folks. So that's to be able to read and understand and learn text, video, images, and so forth, beyond just our traditional transactional data that came from traditional solutions like our enterprise resource planning systems and accounting packages and so forth. How many people here saw the Watson Jeopardy game about 5 years ago, where Watson was competing against some of the top players in the Jeopardy game, and you could actually see through trial and error how Watson was able to perform and actually win against the top contenders. But the Watson solution in cognitive computing has actually evolved since then. Like now it's far more complex. It is actually in the here and now and being used in industries across the world. Everything from healthcare, financial services, public sector, government, law, you name it. Anywhere where you're actually learning a body of knowledge and understanding a body of knowledge in a language, it's almost like an apprenticeship model. So, when you were doing your MBA at Schulich, maybe you were studying finance, you were learning the language of finance, the content, the structure of it, and so forth, and ingesting tons of material. Then you probably got an internship with an organization, had an apprenticeship model where you're learning by practicing and so forth. And many of you today are probably experts through that experience and now are masters in training other people. So that's how the cognitive Watson platform actually learns, the same way as the human brain. So I just wanted to give you that context in terms of what cognitive is and what Watson is all about. So it's able to learn, it can discern information, it can come up with probabilistic outcomes, and it can be trained in that whole process. But when you look at the traditional machines that were out there, computers in the past, they were all programmed, right? So they were great for large transactional kinds of data, doing big, large calculations, and that was where they focused on. But with cognitive today, it can actually learn and become an expert in a particular area, and you can have more of a conversation and a Q&A with the solution to come up with the right answer. And it actually learns by doing, as we do as human beings. So when you look at the human brain, it's very powerful. Our brain is unbelievably powerful. But it has its limitations. There's only so much information that we're able to digest at any one point in time, and actually to remember and to learn. And unfortunately, we also make mistakes, right? So just think of it that way. And then when you look at traditional machine language, it's programmed, it's predetermined, and it's fixed, and it can only deal with basic transactions. So comes cognitive. It's almost bringing that machine power that's scalable and has speed to actually enhance and augment the human capability and skills. So we're not cognitive. I know there's some fear out there that cognitive is going to replace human beings at the end of the day. It's not. It never will. It's a machine. It has the ability to learn, but it requires human expertise to feed it the information so that it can actually learn and develop over time. And it's basically to deal with that huge scale and volume of data that Juan Carlos was talking about. Like when you think about it, could you actually retain how many zettabytes of information? Never mind in a year, but a lifetime? Cognitive computing can actually do it within days or weeks and ingest all of that and come up with some interesting insights that the human brain is unable to, and actually filter through the noise, look at what's really important, because that's what data analytics is all about, right? At the end of the day, it's filtering through that noise, because there's so much information coming at us. How do we discern what is important information from the data, and then actually being able to make real actionable decisions that we can act in confidence? And so this is where the Watson cognitive solution can help us through that process. Okay? So I just wanted to walk you through that. So we've got the brain with its limitations around scale and speed and mistakes. You have the traditional computing power that has its limitations because it can only go up to basic transactional information, but then doesn't have the ability to learn or to advance or to acquire and ingest more information about a particular field and become an expert in the area. So that's where I believe cognitive is the here and now and also the future. I remember we were having a conversation and preparing for this session. They said, well, is cognitive real? And I said, yeah, we have some real examples where cognitive is being used today to drive greater insights in a faster, more agile way. And I'm sure many of you are feeling this today. You got lots of data, you're probably drowning in the data, right? To the point where we have the Internet of Things, or all these sensors. Even our appliances now can track, how, when food is going bad, probably has our personal information on it. How secure is that? But all of these concerns are out there around the data that's being collected by so many applications that we're not even aware of, right? It's beyond us. And so how do we grasp all that information? We're drowning in all this data. When I talk to clients, they basically say, yeah, I've got all this data, but I'm hungry for information. I can't get the insights that I need and the speed that I need it in to make really sound decisions with confidence. And so they just feel that everything's in silos, it's detached, and how do I work through it? So let me walk you through a couple of examples that are real in the financial services sector. I work in financial services, primarily banking, to really highlight the value of what cognitive computing is providing these organizations and the output that they're able to receive. So there's an Asian bank. It's headquartered in Singapore, but it has offices across Asia. And they approached us a few years ago saying some of the areas that they're concerned of in their wealth management areas. I don't know, many of you are in the wealth. Anyone here in the wealth management business? A couple, okay, great. So wealth management, if you look at the business context today, tight margins or reducing margins, highly competitive in terms of getting a share of wallet. And what this particular bank wanted to do was to be able to have more meaningful conversations with their customers. So wanted to empower and provide the information that the wealth advisors needed to actually have more meaningful conversations with their customers. And so what they did is they decided to employ our Watson engagement advisor to help the advisors in terms of making better decisions. So what they did is we trained Watson in the language of finance and wealth management. We fed it a whole bunch of information, everything from analyst reports to the products that they're using, customer profiles, all of that information, and brought that together and able to empower the advisor to have more meaningful conversations with their customers and have real information to help provide better advice in terms of their own personal financial plans and so forth, and based on what they're trying to achieve. And as a result of this, they've been able to improve productivity by about 25% among their wealth advisors. So think about it, improved productivity by 25%, and empowering and providing more insightful information about their customers, their products, and the market to their customers to come up with a sound financial plan or what have you. So that's just one example of where cognitive computing is being used in the here and now and making some real tangible results for them. Basically, each advisor saving about 2 hours a day in terms of any administrative tasks. So now they can focus on having more real and meaningful conversations with their customers. Another example is an example in Europe. And what they're doing with this bank in Europe is that it's basically what we call our digital virtual assistant. So I'm sure many of you do online banking or do call the call center when you have some issues with your bank. And so when you think about it, if you go online and you want to have an interaction, say, how do I apply for a mortgage, right? It's pretty transactional. It usually comes up with some frequently asked questions, or as you're typing it, it kind of says, well, this is how you apply for a mortgage, and call this number to talk to an agent type of thing, right? So it's purely transactional. And what they're trying to do is actually humanize and create a conversation between a digital virtual assistant and their customers or clients. So that's what it's coming down to. And so what they've done is they've implemented this digital virtual assistant using Watson Engagement Advisor for call center deflection and online interactions. And as a result of this, they've been able to increase their productivity by about 30%. So reducing the number of calls to the call center and having real meaningful conversations and providing the kind of information that the customer is asking for. So when you want to apply for a mortgage, and then also ask, based on the questions you're asking, can ask for clarifying questions as well. And based on the answers it gives you, they may also be able to upsell or cross-sell. So what they've realized, again, they got that 30% increase in productivity, but also a 6% increase in revenue because of the ability to upsell. So typically what happens is that you go online and the conversion rate into an actual selling of a product is actually quite low. So this is an opportunity to humanize, create a conversation with your customer, as well as increase top-line revenue. So that's another example where cognitive computing is being used for the European bank. We're also using cognitive computing in a US bank, and this is in the regulatory space. How many people here are impacted by regulations or work for a bank, right? So regulations are huge. You know, many banks spend millions, if not billions of dollars, depending on the size, on regulations. And so when you look at it, how do we make this a more efficient process? And so we're working with this one bank where it's actually being able to ingest all the regulations. So let's pick Dodd-Frank. So how many people know how many pages are in the Dodd-Frank legislation? It's about 2,000 pages. So let's think of the human brain trying to digest 2,000 pages of legislation from just one regulation. There's many. And so what they've been able to do is using cognitive computing, they've been able to pull the legislation that's relevant to them and actually being able to implement the regulation in a more productive and an efficient manner. And in fact, they've again improved productivity by about roughly 20 to 30% in that case. So this is another example where it's being used. So these are, this requires some work in terms of training Watson. So you're probably thinking, well, this is really expensive, it takes a lot of time, and it can. But as we've been working with these solutions, we've been building use cases. And we've developed about 100 use cases just for banking alone on cognitive computing. And there's many of them that I can walk through with you. Some of them, everything from improving underwriting processes for, say, the mortgage business, to, again, the digital advisor, and also for trade surveillance. So you want to ensure that your traders are behaving in an appropriate manner. You can actually use Watson to look at trading activity and ensuring that they're following the rules, basically. So let's just give some examples, real-life examples of where cognitive is being used today. So just to recap, because I only have a few more minutes, I just want to make sure we covered everything. Oh, there's another thing that I think you might find interesting, that we have a website called www.bluemix.net. So it's bluemix.net. And this is where you can actually do psychodemographic profiling of an individual based on, say, their LinkedIn profile. So what you can do is take a cut and paste of someone's LinkedIn profile. I know you think this is funny, but it's free. You can go in. And customers are using this today to understand the psychodemographics of their customers so that they can actually match up the right kind of advisor or customer representative with that person and really dig deeper into that individual's behaviors, interests, and so forth. And therefore you're prepared when you're talking to them, this is the kind of person I'm talking to. It's a lot of fun. Bluemix.net, we all do it. We all visit LinkedIn before we meet someone anyway. So you might as well just take the cut and paste of theirs, and you can actually get an understanding of who they are based on the psychodemographic analysis, and many organizations are using it. So to wrap it all up, in my view, cognitive analytics or banking is all about scope, scale, and speed. If we look at the banking industry, we're all things to everyone, everything from back office to front office, we're everything to nobody. Everyone remembers the portal model. But that's being cut up in terms of many disruptors into the banking industry, where there are digital disruptors that are coming in, starting with a fresh slate, and able to break down that value chain of the bank. And the bank needs to really determine who do they want to partner with in terms of a third party, and also where do they want to focus on in terms of running their business. So if you look at the payments industry in banking as an example, that's, there's huge competition there, and that's pretty well based back office stuff that anyone can do. And if you have the right digital capabilities, you can disrupt that industry completely. And then it's about speed. It's about the pace at which you can actually do the analysis, act with confidence, and actually learn from your mistakes and move forward. So I just wanted to give you an overview in terms of what cognitive computing is, what the cognitive bank is all about. You can use cognitive in any industry. We're using it in healthcare, government, as I said, and a number of other industries such as retail and so forth. But that just gives you an overview, hopefully some food for thought to think about where your organization could use something like cognitive analytics to actually take it to the next level and gain greater insights from the data that you already have. Good?
I'm good. Great.
Okay.
So thanks very much, Connie. So maybe we can save questions to the end. So we can all save your questions, and you'll have a few minutes at the end to ask the best questions. Okay, great. So our next speaker that I want to introduce is Michon Williams. So Michon has spent her career predominantly in financial services, working in various different roles in electronic channels, technology, and marketing, first at RBC and now at BMO. She's currently responsible for technology applied to many of BMO's corporate areas, managing a team of over 100 in support of over 150 applications across marketing, HR, procurement, technology, corporate real estate, communications, audit, and a few more, I guess. She holds a combined honors bachelor degree in arts and science from McMaster.
Computer science.
So it's a computer science specialization, but it was the arts and science program.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I went there as well, so I know that. And an MBA from Schulich, where I also went, from class of 2008. And during her time at Schulich, she was director of the IT group, I guess, in the Global Business Council, and a member of Schulich's lead case competition team, winning the Dean's Cup in 2006.
Oh, wow.
Oh, cool. Yeah, and she currently maintains her tight connections with Schulich as co-president with me in the association. And she has a number of different industry certifications, including project management and information systems auditor. And she's currently completing her master's in in management analytics at Queen's. So please welcome Michon Williams.
It's really hard to come up with a cute name for a talk, but I really like talking smack. And what I mean by that is I mean that there are a lot of really amazing things that are happening in the technology industry that are really disrupting the business that we're in, and that's social, mobility, analytics, and cloud. So I want to talk a little bit about the many sexy opportunities that big data present to our business. And when I say our business, I do mean banking, but because I support many of the corporate areas, I'm very excited about how analytics can be applied in any business in the way that we run businesses, because I'm looking at a lot of the horizontal functions in the role that I play. But I also want to talk realistically. I am in the trenches managing a large application portfolio, and we really are working through what is the organizational transformation that needs to happen, how does the technology need to evolve, how does the business need to evolve, and how do our methods need to evolve in order to prepare ourselves to get even more value from the data that's out there. So I'm going to start with the optimism and talk about SMAC. And how that is actually really opening us up to so many really exciting opportunities. And then talk about, within the context of my current mandate, many of the challenges that we have to overcome and the transformation that we're going along in order to realize some of those opportunities. So I'm probably not going to tell you anything that you don't know, hopefully. I'm so excited, so many technology professionals and folks interested and excited about technology from Schulich in one room, and our friends. So thank you for joining us. But to share my excitement, I love social media. I am constantly almost blowing through my 6 gigabyte plan on my mobile phone. Which I know in a few years will seem really quite small, but the opportunity is amazing. Connie mentioned, being able to kind of scrape someone's LinkedIn profile and get some insights from their background in terms of understanding how you might want to approach them from a sales opportunity. So certainly something that is extremely exciting. We've never had so much information out there tied to people's individual preferences, where they are, what they're interested in, what they might be buying, what they're unhappy with. And as Connie mentioned, this is text. It's a whole other type of data. It's just not our numbers from history, numbers and fields in applications of yesteryear. There's a huge amount of unstructured data out there for us to tap into. And what that means for banking and for corporate areas is, we can learn a lot about what people think of us. We can reach people in terms of employment opportunities. We can use the network of employees that we have out there to promote opportunities at BMO and get people excited about working with us. So I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but if you really think about it, this is the first time in history that everyone is an author, a publisher, a producer, and they're giving us all kinds of valuable information that we can use to run our businesses and to sell our businesses and to understand what's going to work in our business models. So it's really, really exciting, the social space. And that includes both our external environment, all of the public information out there on LinkedIn and Twitter, and also our internal environment as a company. who is collaborating on different topics, who is working in analytics across the organization. People are sharing that information on the intranet. We can find out who are the people that need to be connected. I know Microsoft is investing in some interesting technology on the cloud, Delve, which enables people to collaborate with other folks in smarter ways based on topics that they're sharing and documents that they're working on. So really exciting times inside and outside the bank in terms of social. The other is mobility. So, you know, I remember, and I don't mean to date myself, but I was an early employee at RBC, and I remember being the first person on the floor with a computer with the intranet, or even the internet, and showing people how to search on Alta Vista. And now we all have computers in our hands, and I know that you guys know all of that, but we're only just scraping the surface on that location intelligence. You know, if I'm even visiting a bank and I have a phone and I have your app, you know, how amazingly powerful if we could create augmented experiences while you're waiting. If you can enter, you know, the topic you're interested in, or if we can even predict the topic that you're interested in, and you can have an interactive experience while you're there in the branch. We can reach people where they are, provide a lot more contextual offers, opportunities, and intelligent ways of connecting. I really like what Connie said. You know, we are still a service bank. It's been an interesting evolution. You know, at one point everyone would say, you know, the bank is about people. Then they'd say the bank is about technology. Now they say the bank is about information. It's about all of those things, but first and foremost, it does need to be human, and the people who can win the hearts of their clients will win. And there's so many more opportunities when you can reach people through what they share about themselves publicly. Privacy is obviously a concern, but also reach them where they are and in the context that they're working. So super exciting. And it's no surprise then, so social mobility, that analytics has become such a renewed field of interest. We have programs like the business analytics program at Schulich and the management analytics program at Queens. But it's we are starving for analytics talent in banks. You know, this is not something that is yet pervasive enough. There's a lot of unique capabilities that are required to manage some of the work that I'm going to be talking about that we're doing at BMO. But with this explosion of opportunity, with all of the systems providing rich data and the technology innovations that have made so many more opportunities for mining information available to us, it requires us to change our corporate culture. So one of the big things that's happening, certainly at BMO, is the evolution of a culture and competency around analytics. You know, over the past 10 years, I think we've really gone from a business intelligence, performance management, kind of managing and measuring. You know, we loved our Excel gurus. You know, but everything was very disaggregated. We weren't able to tap into central data warehouses and really mine things. There wasn't the same volume of information available to us. So we've gone from that to now having so many different applications producing information, so many opportunities for information out of the organization, and that requires unique skill sets at a whole set of different levels. We need people that can help us aggregate the data, match the data, create data dictionaries in order to govern and make sure that there's a management of that data. So there's a huge component around governance. There's also, you know, the technology aspect and being able to access the data more quickly. And certainly layered on top of that, skills around analytics, model development. You know, things can go really wrong if you have folks who only have part of the picture that make business recommendations or report something to the board that isn't holistic. You know, it can be even a challenge to count the number of clients that you have in a certain business line if you're not able to match those things. So the skill is becoming so important and so valuable at a whole host of levels. And in order to meet that, the organization does need to change culturally. You know, we've got, and I'll talk a little bit more about the challenges. We do have partners within our organization that are very fearful about giving away their data to the central groups. Is it going to be administered? You know, are people going to interpret it correctly? So we need to figure out how we manage that, and we need to manage the tension of having individual lines of business and business areas managing their own insights and analytics, and the horizontal integration and centricity that is required to really have information end-to-end or 360 about our clients and employees to be able to really position ourselves to realize the benefit of that information. So we're not quite smacked. There's something else that's happening, and that is the cloud. And this is both the bane of and a real exciting time for a technology professional, especially within some of the businesses that I support. You know, Connie mentioned, you know, banks have to be really careful and choosy about the different partners that they work with. There's a lot of different companies out there that are selling software as a service. A lot of that software as a service has analytic capabilities, and businesses have a lot of choice. They don't need to work necessarily with technology directly to have their technology managed. They can get it on the cloud as a service without working with technology. How amazing is that? We can be way faster. You know, it was at one point, you know, everyone had a central e-commerce department, and then you know, it went to everybody has a role to play and a site on internet, and now we've gone from everybody needs to work with technology to have an application to anyone can have an application and a capability. So that is an amazing opportunity for agility and innovation in, you know, like social recruiting as an application. But with that exploding opportunity for innovation, for accessing capability, there's disintermediation of technology, and the resulting challenge becomes how do we ensure that we're able to extract that data that we may be hosting elsewhere? How do we protect that data? How do we aggregate it, and how do we match it? And quite often our business partners may not be thinking about some of these questions when they're purchasing a capability. So how do we establish that consulting relationship so that they will work with us in a way that we can ensure that that data is landed in a way that it becomes a corporate asset, and we can realize some of the exciting opportunities that an aggregated warehouse can provide us. So the cloud is both very exciting, but it also leads our jobs to be quite different in nature, and the questions that we need to ask our partners needs to change so that we can make sure that everything rolls together. So as I said, there are a lot of very exciting opportunities given the explosion of technology, the explosion of mobility, and the move towards the Internet of Things. You know, information isn't just on your desktop, it's anywhere you're moving, it's anywhere you're going, it's tied to cameras, it's tied to sensors. It's so exciting, and that means that there is a lot of opportunity out there. But what I want to talk to you about is some of the challenges that exist in doing that. Certainly within an organization, BMO is the oldest bank in Canada. It is approaching its 200th year. And with that, there's a lot of legacy systems and a lot of legacy data marts. And isn't that a joy to have all of these, all of these assets at our disposal? But it does present a bit of an obstacle to some of the questions that our businesses are asking us for help with. You know, if we want to understand, Michon as a client, what are the different places that I do business with BMO? That information may exist in different systems. And you know, I'd love to say that we're at end of job of aggregating all of the data into one place, but we're not, and it's a ever expanding journey as we add new capabilities to our technology all the time. One of the things that is an additional challenge is we're an extremely regulated industry. And through that regulation, we're asked to provide a lot of information to regulators about information that may not actually help us propel our business through marketing and things like that. So we really need to be strategic when we're driving data aggregation for a regulatory program to make sure that we're using every opportunity to think about how we move the business forward as well. And I wish I could say that that's easy, but you have to balance the tension between doing things that are of specific fit for purpose in different lines of business or related to regulatory initiatives with achieving some of the horizontal objectives of aggregating all of the data together, of making sure that it all matches, and making sure that it's an asset that can be mined for all the opportunities that are out there. So it sounds worse than it is, but we're all getting smacked. And it's a good thing, but it also means that we're going to need to change the way that we work.
Thanks, Michon. I want to introduce our third and final speaker. So Adam Froman, to my right. So he's an award-winning entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Delvinia, a company that he established in 1998 as a digital services consultancy. And since then, he's grown the firm into a globally competitive digital innovation company offering consulting services, investing in finding new ways to commercialize the application of digital technologies, and which includes a portfolio of different successful digital businesses, which he'll be talking to us about in a second. So he believes that digital platforms can be used to create meaningful human connections between companies and their customers, and this is the philosophy that he's applied when developing and growing his companies. He's a member of the Canadian Marketing Association, SOMAR, which is an international market research organization, as well as the Market Research and Intelligence Association. And he holds professional engineering degrees in human factors discipline from U of T, and is an MBA graduate from Schulich from the class of '92. So if you could please welcome Adam.
I'm going to use slides because I was sick and my memory's gone, so I thought it would be a lot of fun.
You need lots of.
Exactly. What's fun about speaking tonight is I get to be the entrepreneur. And, you know, one of the most powerful things of being an entrepreneur that I find in today's digital age is that my vision of what I had back in '92 when I was an unemployed PN MBA coming out of Schulich, that I found my passion, which was digital. And I kind of went on from there, muddled along in terms of understanding what this digital stuff was going to be, lucked out in a job with Deloitte eventually to learn my chops in strategy, and then I got to sort of really venture down my path, my entrepreneurial path back in '98. So one of the questions I always ask people when it comes to the big data stuff is that, how many of you guys are involved in working with big data today? How many of you know how you can make money from big data?
He has the answer.
So the funny thing for me is that big data is a huge thing. One of the most powerful things when I realized digital was going to take over the world back in the early '90s was that we collect a lot of data. And when I started my firm in '98, we actually worked with one of the banks, Michon's former employer, and we actually helped launch online banking. And one of the things we were able to do, because we were the digital guys helping launch it through the digital channels, I collected all this great data about how the campaigns were doing in terms of how people were using it and where they were coming to. And before the end of the pilot program, I presented it to our client, and she said, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And I said, "Well, this is data that's you're going to go into your next quarter. You can adjust your investing, your understanding what's actually pulling people to make the decision to go onto online banking." "Oh no, we'll wait till the next quarter because our agencies will give us the information, they'll give us the reports." And the paradigm that existed of people not being afraid of what data could provide them and the speed of decision making was just so overwhelming, nobody wanted to change. So fast forward to 2016, the world is very different. We're having conferences on big data. We're having companies invest millions of dollars on data. But as an entrepreneur, how do we play in this? What do we have to do? So I evolved in the past year my company from going from a consultancy where we did digital strategy and experience design to what my real vision was to be an innovation firm. And what does an innovation firm mean to me? And that really, the first thing is, I'm a human factors engineer. Engineers are really great at designing things. Not necessarily for people to use them, but they work. Human factors engineers look at things from a user perspective. So when Connie talks about cognitive, I love that stuff because it's all about how do you extract knowledge and then use it in a way that's useful to make decisions in the future. Think about how you're going to use stuff. The next thing is, there's lots of technology out there. I don't build technology. I apply technology. We look at ways of how to use technology in innovative ways to achieve what you want to do. But there's a big market out there, the venture capitalists, the IPO market likes to invest in technologies that do you have your patent? What's your IP? By the time somebody gets their patent, I've already launched a business, I'm making money from it, and I don't really care about patents anymore because they're too slow. And by the time you throw it up there to get your patent, now everyone, especially in the digital space, can take that patent, make that little tweak, and then the patent's useless. If you're selling to Google or to IBM, they like to have the patent because that's sort of what they're buying. But the world of patents has changed. It's based on a culture of innovation. I spend 30% of my time tormenting my staff to think different. And we've built a culture of irreverence. We've built a culture of challenging the status quo. We've built a culture of being very real and authentic in the sense of when clients are sitting there talking to all of their partners about what they should be doing and how to adapt to this digital space, they need the real perspective. And that's where I help my staff do it from the inside. And finally, if you can't make money at it, why do it? As an entrepreneur, I partner with universities because universities are not there to make money, but they're there to provide scholarly perspective on solving problems. I work with banks because they have tons of money. And they're trying to figure this out, and as a good consultant, you're there to help them figure it out. And they finance our learning. And we do it together because a lot of the stuff there is no roadmap. And we're just figuring this stuff out as we're going along. I love companies like IBM. I'm the speedboat with the freighter. They can invest in something like Watson, and for all intents and purposes, I won't pick an IBM, but look at a Google. The amount of data that Google has, the amount they invest in trying to understand their semantic web. And how does Google make money? That boring little search term that when you type in what you want and they sell the advertising. They won't be like that forever. But it's these companies that they have the money, they've made so much money in the digital and technology space that they can invest. I don't have those deep pockets. So how does an entrepreneur like me capitalize in the digital space around big data? Now, I look at big data saying we're just at the tip of the iceberg. Not only is big data we're figuring out how to harness all this data, but once again, how do you commercialize it? How does a company use it to move their business ahead? Connie gave some examples of how they do it. Michon's looking at it holistically within our organization. But for the most part, companies are really struggling with this, just fundamentally. And when they put $1 out, how are they going to guarantee they're going to get a return? A company like mine, if we're going to build some sort of technology that we want to commercialize, how do we know it's going to work? That's what we have to figure out. The other big thing is, when I look at investing in commercializing is about, does it make money, but does it scale? Because if you do this stuff as one-offs every single time, you will not make money. So those are my tenets in terms of how we as an innovation firm approach the digital stuff, because the opportunities are there. The most wonderful thing that exists today is we have a market of consumers who are realizing the power and control they have using digital technologies. Consumers don't even know how powerful they are. And the more companies enable them, the smarter they're getting. And the more the tools out there that are helping the companies be smarter to help their customers be smarter, we're starting to see the opportunities to make money from all this. So this is how I approach big data and how we're capitalizing. I have a nice little consulting firm. Back in as early as 5 years ago, it was the dominant part of my business. I've scaled it down a third, and we only pick our clients that we can help challenge their thinking around how they're dealing with innovation, how they are adapting, no longer how do you use technology to reach your customers, it's how do you fit in the lives of your digital customers. Now the really interesting thing about this that's underlying it since I started my company is it's always been data driven. So if you're looking at something user centric, you're using data to identify how you should create an experience for someone. You're understanding that customer, how they use technology. You're anticipating the changes. But what we're doing now is not only are we building and using data to develop a better customer experience, we're embedding it into what we do to then allow the experience to keep evolving and allow our clients and their digital experiences to keep evolving in terms of adapting to where that customer is going. And also, we created it robust enough that they can test and learn. The next thing is, one of my little ventures that I started back in 10 years ago last year, we started in 2005, because as we were getting successful in the digital space, helping people think through this, someone would inevitably come and say, we need to have our, let's say it's a website, our website going. We're going, great. First we have to understand how your consumers interact with your business, how they use technology. Well, can you have this thing up in 3 months? And we'll go, well, it takes 3 months to figure that out. How are we going to do this? So part of what I wanted to do is I wanted to build a community of Canadians to be able to help us speed up our strategy process. It led into a whole business, because I saw all of a sudden online surveys started making money. And companies would come to us and say, hey, can you help us get these survey filled? And as I grew our panel, and now we have 600,000 Canadians who are participating, I started looking and going, wow, we're collecting a lot of data on Canadians. How do we harness this data and what do we do about it? But the nice part is it's a standalone business. Last year, one of our latest innovations is called Methodify. So part of what's going on in the data world is how do you speed things up? How do you get the insights faster? And in the research world, market research does not move at the speed of data. So we built a tool that goes from research to taking 4 weeks to 48 hours. So while clients get to get insight for their current business, marketers can make decisions faster. The real innovation here is that how does survey data now participate in structured and unstructured data to provide a holistic attitudinal and behavioral data set? That's the cool stuff that we're trying to do, but there's always a business model that helps us do it. But this is where I have my fun. This is where I can invest in learning as I watch what's going around with the big companies being able to invest millions of dollars. I can spend my hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. So we built an innovation model that not only helps us sift through all these opportunities, it also helps us advise our clients in terms of sifting through theirs. And some of the things that we have in Benefit in Canada for entrepreneurs, there's lots of government funding to help us invest in ourselves. And over the years, all of you have been great investors in my company to help me grow and be innovative. I get to hold all the ownership, but it's allowed me to not only be innovative, but to create jobs and take on these challenges. So some of them are, back in 2007, I was thinking about how do we take all this cool data all over the place and derive insight, particularly for digital behavior. But how do we speed this up? So I was in 2007 looking at how do you create a database that could take digital behavior, structured and unstructured, but then have algorithms to spit out decision making. That led to me building the first digital segmentation model in Canada. And the reason I wanted to do this was because of a lot of our experience design is persona-based. So persona-based is you understand who the customer is, and you create a persona about them. In 5 minutes, I can take the postal codes of a client, and we run it through this, and we were able to have the different segments of their customers. It sped up what we were doing incredibly. So then, when all this data was coming, I said, okay, well, this big data, part of the problem that you're able to drive insight is the visualization of data. So there's companies like Tableau that would come in and aggregate your data into one place, all these separate feeds. And the coolest thing is they go in and sell this technology to the banks and to the different players and go, we can have all your data in one place. And they would look at them going, that's great. I don't know what to do with it if you put it in one place or have it in different places. So we sat there and we said, what if you could sit, an executive comes and sits in their office and they could know if they're going to be happy or sad that day of how their business is doing. And the Weather Network, who makes their money off media, waits 2 quarters till they get the reports how it did 2 quarters ago. But how do they know their brand health in near real time? So it was an R&D project that we were able to integrate different types of data and build an algorithm that we partnered with Ryerson University's engineering department to kind of take this on as a challenge. The challenge with this was done in 2011. Trying to get them to invest in it further and commercialize it, impossible. But we get our learnings from that led to automating research. So one of the coolest things that we've been able to do because we're in the data collection world and we're collecting data and we look at this user-centric approach, it's all about getting insights. So in order for me that I knew I had a scalable business that could make money, we built a faster, more robust survey experience for a client to get insights. But what we're trying to learn from it is, how do you use this to speed up the whole insight process with all these different, how do you feed something like a Watson as you're going, because as you're going along and you're using data to learn, what if you can actually go out and talk to the consumers in near real time and feed that in, specifically on the questions you want? This is all forward-thinking things. But the way I'm approaching it is I'm finding the business model now, but there's always the continued investment in it. So my view on the opportunity of big data today is really driven by, we're sitting in the automation space. We're trying to speed up the processes because looking at how you commercialize the entire scope of big data is something that IBM has the resources, BMO has the resources, I don't have. So while I observe what the investment from the larger companies are doing, I see the opportunities to make money today, and today it's in automation. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Very interesting. So our last guest, and guest moderator, in fact, is Professor Murad Cristal. Did I pronounce that right? Okay. And so he's been Professor of Operations Management and Information Systems since 2004. And is currently, as I mentioned before, the Program Director for the recently created Masters in Business Analytics at Schulich. I think it's a 2-year-old program? 3 years old? 4 years. 4 years old, okay, so still pretty recent. And so his areas of specialty include predictive modeling and analysis, statistical research methods, operations management, and supply chain management. And earlier on in his career, he completed his PhD in Operations, Technology, and Innovation Management from the University of North Carolina. So I'll leave the floor to you.
All right, so I am the one who's going to ask the questions to
you're
you
asking us
guys.
questions, okay.
So get ready for the exam.
Oh, geez.
The first one that I want to ask is that, and then I'm going to just open the floor to questions because I'm sure you have more questions than what we have on this, but just to warm you guys up. The first question that I have is that IT managed data warehouse a thing of the past? Are we headed to more widely user-friendly tools, Michon, and then to IBM, if you can respond to that, because you're dealing with data warehouses day in, day out.
I think it's a really interesting question. Are IT data warehouses a thing of the past? I don't know if they're currently a thing of the present, because a lot of organizations are still trying to get there with the maturation of data. I don't necessarily see those things going away. I think there's always going to be a role to play in data aggregation in some form. The data may become increasingly distributed, but we still need ways of bringing that together. one of the things that I think has been really exciting about BMO's journey of maturation around analytics is increasing the increasing commonality of using visualization tools, like the one that Adam mentioned. A lot of folks are leveraging those tools and tapping into our central data warehouses to better understand their business. So it is becoming much more of a business consumable service with the centralization of data. Will data always be centralized in a physical data warehouse? Maybe not, but I think that the service of data aggregation will always be an important one.
Connie?
So you're getting into what we call the group data warehouse, right? And a lot of the banks are moving in that direction. But what we're seeing more and more is the concept of a data lake. Has anyone heard of the concept of data lakes? Yeah, so this is basically where you're bringing in information from across the organization, because many organizations, especially the larger banks, have data that's quite siloed, has come across due to a number of merger and acquisitions. I always call it the fur ball or the spaghetti of information. And what's happening now from a data analytics perspective, so there's the storing of data, obviously, and then there's the reporting of it, but then there's the analytics of it. And what we're seeing more and more is organizations are implementing what we call data lakes, where you're pulling in information from a number of sources, where you can actually start doing analysis and playing with the data, as we call it. But you wouldn't necessarily report on that data. So still, when you're looking at financial and regulatory reporting, that's coming from your group data warehouses and transactional systems that you have confidence in the information. And the information we're putting into data lakes is more for the data analytics and the analysis and the one-offs and so forth. So we're seeing organizations move in those directions in terms of being able to leverage more advanced analytics and predictive modeling.
Yeah, it's absolutely something that we're looking at as well. There's a big layering effect. You've got some places where we've got a lot of centralization in our core reference data, but people need places to play and to experiment to even find out what questions they want answered. So having, like the term data lake, a place to experiment or sandbox.
You just want it to turn into a data swamp because you get a lot of dirty data in there. So you have to have the data governance that we were talking about earlier in terms of how do you keep the integrity of the information.
Adam, based on your consulting experience, I have a question that it says, do you see an aversion to using data given that it can impact organizational power dynamics, shifting, and then people are kind of, they don't want to use the big data or the insights because they are worried about they're going to lose their decision-making power or their managerial intuition. If you see it, how do you influence them?
Well, Michon brought that up before, is that people are still hoarding their data. And they think they're afraid to give up their data because they're afraid they're going to lose something because of it. So, the challenge, most of my clients are probably similar to Connie's, and they're large companies. Dealing with the organizational changes that have to occur to think about harnessing data is probably the number one challenge next to the legacy technology. What we're finding is that usually, and it's not in IT anymore, that you're getting either in marketing or in the insight groups, they're getting the mandate to not only control the data, but to put the return on investment on investing in data. So it's slowly getting there, and what we're finding is that once you find that individual who's got the mandate from the CEO, because it's coming right from the CEO, to say, how are we going to use data to move our business ahead, they become the big stick to challenge all the resistance within the organization, and they're being given access to. So, because that's just the start, and I like the swamp analogy, because everyone thinks their data is amazing. Data sucks most of the time. It's dirty. It takes hours and sometimes weeks and months to clean up data just to be able to use it to start building algorithms. So now, when you're fighting to get data available through an organization and centrally make it centrally accessible, now you're sitting there going, I'm exhausted from that. Now we have to start figuring out what the hell to do with this data. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics, but we're seeing more and more an insight group that's usually born out of the research group in organizations, that somebody has the mandate to hold all data.
And you're seeing the rise of the role of the chief data officer to that. I mean, maybe people, well, the major banks have them, a lot of organizations are moving to the chief data officer to actually help with the data governance that was talked about earlier by Michon, in terms of how do we control how the data is used, who owns it, and who takes care of it. And many of my clients, they say, we have all this data, but their biggest issue is the quality of the data. So for the garbage in, garbage out, we've heard this term a lot, but that's where they struggle and say, even if we did implement all these great analytical tools and approaches, it's just going to be bad data, creating bad information and creating a situation where we may be making the wrong decisions. So those are the kinds of things that companies are struggling with today.
Any questions from the floor? Wow, okay.
I have a question for the first speaker because you mentioned, Michelle mentioned.
If you could speak up so the rest of us can hear.
Yeah, so I have a question regarding the cloud environment because I worked in TD, implement one program on cloud. So there's a lot of disruption. There's a couple of things that I find especially challenging. One is the data in terms of migration to cloud and how we make sure the transition from physical to cloud is transitioned smoothly, give the business partner the assurance that it works perfect. It won't, screw up my analytics. Another thing is regarding the data masking. When we transfer data from this insurance side to our server for development, we have to do some data masking to ensure the security of the data. So what are the mechanism, or what do you see how we as a technology partner to deal with and to make the business partner more assured that the data we provided, the project we implemented are giving them insurance to use safely. This is for all the speakers. I know you all have a great experience on those. Thank you.
So if I can summarize, we have problems with scrubbing the data and then making it anonymous if you're doing analysis on that data. Data security, and then the cloud.
From physical server to the cloud environment, how we make those. We just started at TD. Like my project is the first one, and we are implementing cross enterprise. So how to make sure those things, as an executor, I'm role is just an executor, how to make the leaders or the business minimum level my business partners be assured that what we implement are safe and also smooth solutions for the business.
And may I add to that, how do you make sure, as a bank or working with a big organization, when you put your data into cloud, how do you know that that is stored in Canada or in the United States or goes someplace else all of a sudden because they provide cheaper housing and then it leaks somewhere? Does that make you lose your sleep?
It's such a good question, and the reason that it's a good question is there are certainly a lot of businesses out there who are very interested in taking over our infrastructure business and making it their business. And they can offer us, potentially some savings if they take over, some of the housing and support and ongoing vulnerability management activities that technology would typically do. So we certainly have a lot of pressure from our vendors to adopt that model. And we balance that pressure against, a lot of the fears and concerns that our business partners have. And it really comes down to governance. So you need to have, I'm not an information security expert. I'm a technology professional that works with all of those areas of expertise. So certainly I expect that at TDE you have something similar, which is that every different project you're considering, whether you're comparing the option of staying on your own premise or you're moving to the cloud, that a common approach to assessing the risk and the standards around where's their data center, how is their data center managed, what are the information security controls around that. It's very interesting because more and more the work of a technology professional is also about contracting and making sure that you're setting up the right arrangements to protect the business. I think that as people become more familiar with the types of questions and controls that we put in place in negotiating new agreements with vendors, some of that fear will go away. But I think we're still in that position of, some discomfort.
We are test learn. Well, my team is the first project, and the developer, even the consultant we hired from US, we are learning through the implementation.
So one of the benefits of working in a large organization, we are actually building more repeatable capabilities around assessing risk of different vendors, and I don't have to do that alone because I work with other individuals that help ask the right questions, and we're moving towards standardized approaches for decision frameworks around the type of applications that make sense to move to the cloud. There are some applications we don't want to move to the cloud at this point, but there are certainly places where we can experiment and take advantage of some of the lower costs and enabling us to focus more on our core business than managing the vulnerability patching on a server, for example.
And I think there should be a distinction between the private and the public cloud as well. So how many people are familiar with that? So obviously if it's very sensitive information, you probably want to keep it in-house, and then if it, to the next level, be a private cloud where it's basically a standalone server, only your information's on it, you're not sharing with anyone else. Then the public cloud where it's available to everyone. And obviously you wouldn't put sensitive information there. So I think
on Google Drive.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't do that, right? So I think you need to think through, like, where does it make sense to put things onto the cloud? And when you think about it, the economic model that's been discussed here, it shifts the model from making huge investments in infrastructure up front in terms of capital investments. It's actually changing the business model and the financial model, so you actually pay, you rent as you use type of thing, and that's why many organizations are moving in that direction. So you need to always balance the costs, the benefits, and the risk associated with each business model, and where does it make sense and where doesn't it, and choosing the right partners, obviously, that have the right history, reputation, and security in place that can support that. We talked to one of the CEOs, his number one concern is IT risk. Every organization is vulnerable to all kinds of issues, and it's not just accessing information, now it's about data destruction. So that seems to be the next level of concern in many organizations, not only accessing my customer information, but actually destroying it. So.
It's really interesting because we've had a similar, arc of concern with offshoring models, right? And I view it as being very analogous. And it has to be around, identifying what the potential risks are, deciding what are the things that you're willing to outsource or move to the cloud, deciding the right model of private cloud and what the controls are, and working really smartly with both your internal risk assessors and your prospective partners to negotiate the right agreements.
Yes, sir.
I just would like to ask a follow-up question, and specifically to Connie about that. Certainly, one of the compelling messages that I hear about cloud computing is this opportunity to ramp up resources as you need them, and certainly in an area like machine learning, big data, the ability to spread vast amounts of data. All those, you've got data in so many different silos, as was discussed, and the ability to put that into a large environment and ramp it up to do analysis. It sounds so magical. But
we have this magic wand at IBM. It's complex. Yeah.
No, but what I just see this incredible resistance. I'm just kind of, the reason I'm looking at you with the question is, I'm just kind of trying to get your sense for whether or not, are you seeing your clients basically say, yes, we've reached a point where, you've drilled it into us as our vendor that we have 100% confidence that our data will be secure, and as a consequence, we're relaxed enough to be willing to take advantage of this huge resource, and the fact that we don't have to make the investment in that infrastructure, and particularly in the context of big data, and we wanted to be able to do this analysis. We don't have Watson the Watson appliance in our office. So, and until you're willing to develop that appliance, maybe it is under development.
Well, Watson is a cloud solution, in fact.
It's a cloud solution.
So
but
Watson is a
there's
cloud.
not an appliance solution that I can bring into my.
No.
No.
So the only way you get Watson is through a cloud solution, as an example. And is there opportunity in cloud, and are companies moving in that direction? They are. It's actually one of our fastest growing pieces of our business is in the cloud. And when you think about it, there's many industries and many startups that are actually starting from a clean slate, and they're going to the cloud. It actually reduces their startup costs. You don't need as much money to invest. Many of the disruptors in the banking industry are digital disruptors, that everything that they're doing is on the cloud. They didn't have to make a huge investment in infrastructure. Some of the legacy organizations like banking that have been around for 200 years have more challenging decisions to make, because they already have this infrastructure and it's all over the place. They need to figure out how do they get their heads around it.
So, I can understand from a transaction. If I'm an application developer with software as a service application that I'm making available to the globe, I can understand why I'd want to be in the cloud for sure. But as a business that is a legacy style business, and I'm interested in machine learning, it's on the machine learning side that I'm kind of curious whether or not you're seeing your clients start to say, yes, we want to do it, we have to do it, and we're willing to throw our data.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of experimentation too, and risk taking. So you need an organization and a client that's open to experimenting and moving that direction and moving into that innovation realm that's been talked about by Adam, and really seeing the benefits of it. You need someone that's forward thinking enough to do that, and willing to take some of the risk. And in IBM, we sometimes share the risk with organizations. We have the deep enough pockets apparently. But I mean, but we've made over $1 billion investment in cognitive computing over the last 5 years. Yeah, it's pretty deep. But I mean, so it's not everyone has that luxury, but we also do it for, we talked about commercial success, but I think it's also around societal progress as well. The kind of work we're doing in the healthcare industry, where we're actually able to predict viruses in premature babies 24 hours before they occur. So those are the kinds of things where it's actually, changing the world, but also creating commercial success. So you need to think of it in that way. And organizations are doing it, and if you're not doing it, your competitors are, and they're leapfrogging you, and actually new disruptors into your industry are doing it. Be it in the banking industry, be it you look at Netflix, you look at Uber, all of those models that are coming about due to the fact that they're able to leverage the more modern technology, and a bank trying to modernize their technology is a huge journey. Someone who has a clean slate can come in. They're complete modern. They start off, and they're able to start their companies with very little money. Uber's financial business case is actually quite compelling. Unfortunately, their business model is already obsolete with the Google car, when you think about it, right? So those are the kinds of things to think about, where we constantly need to innovate.
A lot of what, we're in the midst of, we're weeks away in the insurance business, helping a traditional insurance group launch their direct-to-consumer offer. And at the same time, they're looking at their corporate presence in terms of the data they collect. And in insurance, they have their models in terms of the way insurance has always worked. We've been lucky enough for the past 10 years to work on direct-to-consumer stuff in the insurance space. So it was fascinating from when we worked with our former client, where it was all legacy systems after consolidation of acquisitions, and the data was all, in terms of going through the whole application process and where data existed to pull from to go through it. We were dealing with legacy systems, which is horrible, and then we would have to build a front-end experience that would talk to all those things. This experience we've been having, because it was fresh, actually went down two paths. One was, because of the sensitivity of data coming through an application process, as Connie, they had to build their own infrastructure. But in order to move some of the tools, in terms of the innovative advisor decision-making tools we built for them, we built those in the cloud. But we had to sit through with their IT group and not shove it down their throat, but work with them and saying, look, we're the innovators. We understand how to make this work. We're living with new technology, but we're sensitive to the legacy systems. Ultimately, you're dealing with the sensitive information, they don't want it in the cloud. Especially in Canada, regulatory,
restrictions. We're dealing with this every day, which they can't control once information's going through the internet. Can it stay within Canada? But they have to have the servers and that in Canada. So we're supporting the large IT companies going through this cultural change to adapt to today. But they're moving at the pace of their customer. And it's a very much a hybrid approach. So we're mixing cloud with legacy systems, but we look at it mostly as a pilot process and an iterative process. So it's neither here nor there, and there's a lot of people that just need to start exploring it because they get intimidated by the cloud, and there's very real security concerns in the cloud.
There's also real opportunities. Like one of the things that I think is most exciting about many of the software as a service providers or cloud offerings is your product roadmap can move at a much faster pace. And the interest of those providers to add features and functionality to the what ultimately is a shared product can move you a lot faster in terms of capability. So I think it's important for us not to forget the opportunity. It just has to be weighed around against some of those risks, and all of those controls that I mentioned before need to be in place. And if you're having a challenge in an organization pushing something forward, being strategic about selecting something that you can have as a learning application or a learning service is a good way to kind of move in that direction and demystify some of the questions and controls that need to be in place to take advantage of the opportunity.
So please give a big round of applause for our speakers.